Some doors are left locked for a reason, and some voices should never be answered, no matter how small. The hum of the hotel was a living thing. Even at 3 in the morning, the Grand Alistair Hotel breathed around Isabella a low, constant respiration of air conditioning, distant elevator chimes, and the ghostly clatter of the ice machine down the hall. Working the graveyard shift in room service was a study in isolation. It's a lonely orbit through carpeted corridors and silent kitchens. Tonight, however, was different. It's an ordered ticket printed with a jarring mechanical screech that tore through the quiet. Isabella flinched, her heart kicking against her ribs. She'd been half asleep, head propped against her hand, staring at the polished silver cloches lined up like sleeping chrome beetles. She tore the ticket from the machine, her eyes struggling to focus on the text. Penthouse suite, 1x child's meal, chicken tenders, fries, 1x chocolate milk. Isabella frowned. The penthouse. That wasn't right. She walked over to the large, cork-backed duty board, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking on the linoleum. A heavy laminated card was pinned next to the penthouse slot, the words stark in thick black marker. Out of service. Deep cleaning and maintenance. Do not enter. It had been that way for 3 days. No one was supposed to be in that room. It had to be a system glitch, or maybe a new high-profile guest had checked in without the system being updated, a politician or celebrity demanding absolute privacy. Protocol was clear. Always confirm orders to the penthouse. She picked up the phone, the plastic cool against her skin, and dialed the 4-digit extension. It rang once, twice. She was about to hang up, convinced of a computer error, when the line clicked open. For a moment, there was only a faint, staticky silence. "Hello?" Isabella said, her voice overly bright. "This is room service. I'm just calling to confirm an order." More silence. Then, a tiny voice, so soft it was almost lost in the line noise. "Hello?" It was a child, a little girl. Isabella's posture straightened. "Hi there," she said, gently. "I have an order here for some chicken tenders and a chocolate milk. Is that right?" "Yes," the girl whispered. "Please, hurry. He gets so hungry in the dark." A chill, sudden and sharp, traced a path down Isabella's spine. The words were strange, nonsensical, but the tone was what truly unnerved her. It was a flat, vacant sort of plea. Isabella asked, forcing a light chuckle. "Is your dad hungry too?" "No," the girl said, her voice dropping even lower, as if sharing a secret she shouldn't. "The man in the closet. Stomach makes noises." The line went dead. Isabella stood frozen, the receiver still pressed to her ear, listening to the dial tone's monotonous drone. Every rational part of her brain screamed that it was a prank. Kids say weird things. It was a guest's daughter playing a game. The penthouse was supposed to be empty, stripped bare. No furniture, no guests, no children. And no closets a man could hide in while the room was being deep cleaned. Against her better judgment, she loaded a tray. The kitchen was eerily quiet as she plated the chicken tenders and fries, her hands moving on autopilot. She poured the chocolate milk, her fingers trembling slightly. The entire time, the girl's words echoed in her mind. The man in the closet. His stomach makes noises. The journey to the top floor was the longest of her life. The service elevator, usually a rattling, familiar box, felt like a cage slowly being drawn toward something terrible. It opened with a mournful ding into a private vestibule, a small, richly decorated antechamber that served only the penthouse suite. The air up here was different, stagnant and cold. The ornate wallpaper seemed to watch her, its floral patterns like 1,000 unblinking eyes. She pushed the service cart across the thick carpet, its wheels making no sound. The only noise was the frantic thumping of her own heart and the faint clinking of the silverware on the tray. She reached the grand double doors of the penthouse and hesitated. There was no light visible underneath, no sound of a television or a conversation. There was nothing, just a profound and heavy silence. She raised a hand to knock, but her knuckles stopped an inch from the wood. A sound came from inside. It was a faint, dry scraping. It's a sound of fingernails dragging slowly across a wooden surface. Isabella's breath hitched. She started to back away, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp. The cart, she realized. She had to get the cart. She reached for it, and her elbow bumped the tray. A glass of chocolate milk wobbled, clattering against the plate. Instantly, the scraping inside the room stopped. A new sound replaced it, a low, guttural rumble, a wet, hungry growl that vibrated through the thick door and into the soles of her shoes. It wasn't the sound of a man. It wasn't human at all. Then, the little girl's voice, right at the door. So close, Isabella could almost feel the breath of the words through the wood. "You made him mad," the voice whispered, imbued with an ancient, chilling sorrow. "He doesn't like to be kept waiting." Isabella didn't scream. The sound was trapped in her throat, a knot of pure, primal terror. She abandoned the cart, turned, and ran. She didn't wait for the elevator, fumbling for the handle of the fire escape door, her lungs burning. She clattered down the echoing metal stairs, not stopping, not looking back, convinced that at any moment she would feel cold, skeletal fingers close around her ankle. She burst back into the main hotel lobby, a wild-eyed mess, nearly colliding with her night manager. Mr. Davies, who was doing his final rounds. He took one look at her face, and his own grew pale. "Isabella, what on earth happened?" Gasping for air, she stammered out the story, the order. The girl on the phone, the sounds from behind the door. Mr. Davies listened, his expression shifting from concern to a deep, weary dread she had never seen on him before. When she finished, he simply shook his head, his gaze distant and haunted. "The penthouse has been empty for a week, Isabella," he said, his voice low and grave. "We had to call in a specialized team. The last guest. There was an incident, a family. The police report just called it a tragedy." He swallowed hard, looking up toward the ceiling, as if he could see through all the floors to the very top. The little girl. They never found her. Of all the things that live in the dark places of the world, the worst are the ones that wait. They are patient, you see, because they know that sooner or later, someone always comes looking. The official report called it a routine maintenance check on a decommissioned spur of the city's subway system. For Marcus, it was just another Tuesday. Section 8, a deep, forgotten artery of track that hadn't seen a train in 30 years, was his responsibility. The air down there was different, heavy, still, and cold, with the metallic temps of rust and decay. It was a silence so profound it felt like a pressure against his eardrums. He liked the solitude. Usually, up on the surface, the city was a screaming, chaotic mess. Down here, 200 feet below the pavement, there was only him, his tools, and the long, stretching darkness of the tunnel, broken only by the bright beam of his headlamp. The power to the line, including the lethal third rail, had been cut decades ago. It was as safe as a tomb. He'd been working for about 2 hours, replacing a section of corroded signal cable when he first saw it. A flicker far down the tunnel in the direction he'd come. He paused, wrench in hand, and squinted into the oppressive black. It was probably just his eyes playing tricks on him. But then it happened again. A brief, brilliant shower of blue-white sparks erupting from the third rail. Marcus frowned. He lowered his tools and stood up, his boots crunching on the gravel ballast. That was impossible. The entire section was dead. He'd verified it himself before coming down. He keyed the radio on his shoulder. "Spatch, this is Marcus in Section 8. You read me?" Static answered. "Ain't." That wasn't unusual. The tunnel walls were thick. Another burst of sparks sizzled, brighter this time, and in that fleeting, 1-second flash of light, Marcus saw something. It was standing on the tracks about 100 yards away. The light was too quick for him to make out details, but the shape was all wrong. It was tall, impossibly tall, but stooped over as if its own height was a burden. "Hey," Marcus shouted, his voice swallowed by the tunnel's immense throat. "Is someone down there?" "This is a restricted area." There was no reply. Only the dripping of water somewhere in the dark and the faint, almost imperceptible hum that now seemed to emanate from the third rail. He felt a prickle of unease, a cold dread that had nothing to do with the tunnel's temperature. He was supposed to be alone. Another flash. The figure was closer now, maybe 80 yards. Okay. It was shuffling, not walking. Okay. A slow, dragging gait, one foot scraping along the gravel, then the other. Okay. And it was moving toward him. In that flash, he saw more. It was wearing what looked like old, tattered work clothes hanging loosely on a skeletal frame. Its head was bowed low, its long, stringy hair obscuring its face. Its arms hung down past its knees, the fingers nearly scraping the ground. "This isn't funny," Marcus yelled, his voice trembling slightly. He started backing away, his heart hammering against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. Couldn't take his eyes off the approaching form. Sparks erupted again, a sustained, crackling arc of electricity that lasted for 3 full seconds, bathing the tunnel in a ghastly, strobing light. The figure was 50 yards away. It lifted its head. There was no face. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth, pale, and featureless expanse of skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Yet Marcus felt, with a certainty that froze the marrow in his bones, that it was looking right at him. The hum from the rail grew louder, a vibrating, hungry sound that resonated deep in his chest. And beneath the hum, he could now hear the shuffling getting closer. Scrape, drag, scrape, drag. Panic, pure and absolute, finally broke his paralysis. He turned and ran. He didn't look back, didn't dare. He just sprinted, his heavy work boots slipping on the loose gravel. Tap, the beam of his headlamp bouncing wildly off the curved, sweating walls of the tunnel. The air burned in his lungs. The sound was right behind him. Scrape, drag, scrape. It wasn't fast, but it was steady. It didn't need to rush. It had all the time in the world. He could feel a strange coldness chasing him, a drop in temperature so sharp it felt like plunging into icy water. The smell of ozone from the sparking rail was thick and acrid, mixing with the tunnel's musty scent of decay. Hay risked a glance over his shoulder. A flash of light was 20 yards behind him, its long arms swinging in a sickening, unnatural rhythm. Its featureless face was tilted up towards him, a blank canvas of absolute horror. It hadn't sped up, yet it had gained on him. He sobbed, a raw, desperate sound, and pushed himself harder. The access ladder, it had to be close. His lungs were on fire. His legs screamed in protest. The shuffling was so close now, he could hear the grit of the gravel under its feet. He could feel the vibrations through the soles of his boots. Then he saw it, a faint rectangle of rusted metal set into the tunnel wall. The ladder. He threw himself at it, his fingers fumbling for the rungs. He scrambled upward, not daring to look down, expecting to feel a cold, impossibly long hand grab his ankle at any moment. The shuffling stopped directly below him. He didn't stop climbing until he burst through the manhole cover onto a deserted, rain-slicked street, gasping the clean, cold night air. He lay on the asphalt for a long time, shaking uncontrollably, his mind a whirlwind of terror. Marcus never went back. Key quit his job the next day, offering no explanation. He moved out of the city a week later. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the silence of his new, quiet life is too profound, he can still hear it. A faint, rhythmic scraping. And he knows with a chilling certainty that some things don't need a reason to hunt. They just need a place to wait. And deep beneath the city, in the cold, oppressive dark of the abandoned tunnels, something is still shuffling along the tracks, lighting its own way with impossible sparks. It's waiting for the next person to come looking. Ben always thought the most unnerving part of his job was the silence. He was about to find out how wrong he was. For the first 6 months, the North Ridge History Museum was just a job for Ben, a quiet one, and that's what he needed. His shift started at 10 p.m., long after the last employee had gone home. It ended just before the sun reached the horizon. His duty was simple: walk the halls, check the doors, and make sure a century's worth of history stayed right where it belonged. The silence of the place was a living thing. It was a thick, heavy blanket that muffled the sound of T's, his own footsteps on the polished marble floors, and made the hum of the climate control units sound like a distant, sleeping beast. He'd grown accustomed to the ghosts of the museum, not literal ones, but the feeling of being watched by portraits of stern-faced founders, or the unsettling stillness of the Civil War exhibit, with its rows of sightless mannequins in uniform. But the one place that still managed to prickle the hairs on his arms was the Pioneer family exhibit. It was the museum's pride and joy, a life-size diorama sealed behind a velvet rope. Inside a recreation of a log cabin room, 4 wax figures were frozen in a moment of domestic tranquility from the 1880s. The father, a burly man with a thick beard and a placid expression, stood by the stone fireplace, a prop axe resting against the mantel. The 2 children, a boy and a girl, sat on a bearskin rug, their painted smiles locked onto a wooden toy train. And then there was the mother. She was seated at the head of a rough-hewn dinner table, a ceramic pitcher in her hands, forever about to pour water that wasn't there. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes, 2 chips of lifeless blue glass, were fixed on an empty spot across the table. In the daytime, with the chatter of school children filling the air, she was just a historical artifact. But at night, under the sterile glow of the security lighting, she looked expectant, waiting. Ben always felt her eyes on him as he passed, and he made a point of keeping his flashlight beam aimed away from her face. Tonight started like any other. It was a Tuesday, cold for the season. Ben did his initial sweep of the ground floor, the beam of his flashlight cutting a clean cone through the darkness. The old building creaked and groaned around him, familiar sounds he'd long since cataloged and dismissed. He checked the locks on the main entrance, then made his way up the grand staircase to the 2nd floor, his rubber-soled boots squeaking softly with each step. He saved the Pioneer exhibit for the middle of his patrol. As he rounded the corner into the west wing, he felt it. It's a change in the air. The usual hum of the ventilation seemed distant, and a distinct pocket of cold washed over him, making him shiver. He dismissed it as a draft from one of the old single-pane windows. He stepped up to the velvet rope of the Pioneer exhibit, his flashlight beam sweeping across the scene. Fireplace, check. Father figure, check. Children on the rug, check. Dinner table. Ben froze. His heart gave a painful, stuttering lurch. Okay, the table was no longer fully set. The mother's chair was empty. He blinked, thinking his tired mind was playing tricks on him. He swept the light across the table again. The pitcher she was always holding now sat alone in the center of the table. The chair was pushed back slightly, as if someone had just stood up from it. His breath hitched in his throat. His gaze darted frantically around the sealed-off room, his light shaking. And then he saw her. The mother figure was no longer at the table. She was standing on the other side of the room, near the diorama's only painted-on door. Her back was mostly to him, but her head was slightly turned, her blue glass eyes now fixed directly on that prop door, as if contemplating leaving. She was perfectly still, but her new position was a scream in the dead silence of the museum. Ben's blood ran cold. This was impossible. The exhibit was roped off. The only way in was through a locked maintenance door at the back, and he held the only key on site. He fumbled for his radio, his hand trembling too much to properly grip it. A prank had one of the daytime staff stayed behind to mess with him. It was too elaborate, too cruel. He backed away from the rope, his eyes locked on the wax figure. He had to check the security office. He had to see the footage. He practically ran down the hall, the sound of his own frantic footsteps echoing like a drumbeat. In the cramped security office, he rewound the tape for the West Wing camera. He watched the time stump in the corner as he fast-forwarded. It's 10 p.m., 11 p.m., 12 a.m. Nothing. The exhibit was still normal. The mother was seated. He continued watching. At 1:17 a.m., exactly 15 minutes before he'd arrived, the camera feed dissolved into a brief, violent blizzard of static, lasting only 3 seconds. When the picture returned, the mother figure was standing by the door. There was no glitch, no prankster climbing over the ropes. Just 3 seconds of digital snow and a fundamental law of the universe being broken. A wave of nausea rolled over him. He felt an intense, irrational fear that was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. This wasn't just creepy, it was fundamentally wrong. He had to go back. He had to be sure. Armed with the impossible knowledge from the security tape, he walked back to the exhibit, his feet feeling like lead. The cold spot was still there, even more pronounced now. He approached the velvet rope slowly, his flashlight held out like a weapon. He looked at the mother figure, standing there, patient and silent. And then a new, more profound horror washed over him. He noticed a detail he'd missed in his initial panic. Her head had turned. It was just a fraction of an inch, but it was undeniable. Before, she had been looking at the painted door. Now, her face was angled slightly more towards the room's entrance, towards him. Her placid wax expression hadn't changed, but the new angle made it feel predatory, accusatory, as if in answer to his unspoken terror. A sound cut through the silence. Scrape. It was the soft, grating sound of wood dragging on wood. It came from the dinner table. Ben swung his flashlight beam back towards it. The little boy figure, the one who was always on the floor with his train, was now standing up. He was behind the mother's empty chair, his little wax hands resting on the back of it, as if he just pushed it away from the table for her. His painted-on smile now looked like a terrifying, knowing smirk. That was it. Ben was done. He didn't scream. The sound was trapped in his lungs. He stumbled backward, his hand finally finding his radio. He keyed the mic, his voice a choked, breathless whisper. "Dispatch. This is Ben at the museum. Something is wrong here, in the Pioneer exhibit." He didn't wait for a response. He turned and fled, not caring about protocol or procedure. "Okay?" As he sprinted down the hall, he risked one last glance over his shoulder. The beam of his flashlight caught the exhibit one final time. The mother figure hadn't moved from her spot, but her head was now turned fully, her vacant blue eyes staring directly down the hall after him. Ben never finished his shift. He burst out of the emergency exit into the pre-dawn chill and never went back. The museum director called him the next day, offering a placid, rational explanation about faulty mounts and a maintenance team that had forgotten to log their work. Ben didn't argue. He just quit. He knew what he saw. He knew that for 3 seconds of static, the world had turned inside out. He knew the family in the cabin wasn't just a depiction of the past anymore. They were awake, and the mother, for some unknowable reason, had wanted out. And with that final story, we pull back from the abyss. For now, tales of ordinary lives brushing against the extraordinary, the terrifying, the unexplainable, from the shadow that mimics to the voice that calls from an empty house. We've seen tonight how thin the veil between our reality and a much darker one can be. These stories are not just fiction. They are born from real experiences, whispered in hushed tones, and shared to remind us that we are not always alone. And that's the most chilling thought, isn't it? Perhaps one of tonight's stories reminded you of something that happened to you, or to someone you know. A strange occurrence you've tried to forget. A noise in the night you rationalized away. A figure you saw for just a second. The details of your own brush with the darkness are what give this channel life. I invite you to leave your own story in the comments below. Let us know what you've seen in the shadows. If these stories sent a shiver down your spine, show your support by hitting that like button. It helps these tales reach others who need a reminder to check their locks at night. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell. We have so many more stories to share, and you won't want to be left in the dark. Until next time, remember that you are not afraid of being alone. You are afraid of the bone-deep certainty that you are not.